but as the seat of who you are. We're here to talk about what happens when the map you have used to navigate your life, the map that got you through training, through deployments, and through the darkest shifts, suddenly stop matching the terrain beneath your feet. This is going to be an invitation to look at the barriers that you may have built, either in silence or isolation, or even fear of being seen as less than. To dismantle them brick by brick, we're going to move from the shadows and the invisible struggle into a place of action. So that is the intent here today. So why is this conversation so difficult? Why do individuals wait until, it's too heavy before we ask for an extra hand or we ask for intervention? If you broke your leg, say, on a job site, you would have this cast, and that cast would serve as this powerful object to kind of let everyone know, hey, I'm healing. Give me space. It validates your pain and it explains your pace. But a brain injury, it is the ultimate invisible burden. You look in the mirror and you see the same face. Your colleagues, your friends, and your family, they see the same person, the same person that's been reliable, who's always been strong, but inside that architecture has shifted. So there are specific walls that you may have hit when you're trying to navigate this terrain. First, the invisible nature of the injury itself. You carry a profound weight that no one else can see, and it kind of creates this dissonance, vibration between how you look on the outside and how you feel on the inside. Perhaps you feel like an actor in a play where everyone else has the script and you're kind of left there in the wind trying to improvise every line. Second, the confusion of the symptoms. Is it stress? Is it exhaustion? Is it aging? Or is it just your body keeping the score? The symptoms of TBI often mirror depression or trauma, kind of creating this tangled knot. And this tangled knot, it's impossible to unravel without the right guide. You start to wonder if you're injured or if you're just losing your edge or even if you're just losing your mind. I know that's just some of the common themes that I've heard, like Katerina, I just feel like I am not myself, or my loved ones are saying I'm like this completely different person. And then third, the cultural barrier. You were trained to endure. Fourth is the fear of judgment. That fear that if you do speak up, you're going to have this label. And especially if you are still working, if you're still active duty military, now that label does come with different impacts. And then finally, access. So the sheer exhaustion of trying to find a map to the right doctor or the right support group or the right clinic, the right open door when your brain is just already so tired. So just even, the logistics of not knowing where to begin or how to navigate, create those emotional walls. And today we acknowledge that they do exist. And we also acknowledge that we can walk through them with the right tools and support in place. So let's speak about the reality of that unseen picture. There is a profound loneliness in navigating a world that feels slightly out of focus. The silent struggle. You might be sitting at a dinner table surrounded by your family, your spouse, your kiddos, and yet you feel like you may be watching them through a thick sheet of glass. You're there, but you're not really there. Maybe the noise of the silverware feels aggressive, or the chewing feels a little bit too loud. The lights feel too bright, and you want to connect, but your system is kind of in this survival mode. So the statistics tell us that less than half of those struggling will ever raise their hand. And I really want you to think about that for a second when you really think about things in terms of, perhaps your colleagues or individuals that you've worked with in the past. That means every person who speaks up, there is another sitting in silence, convinced that their confusion is perhaps a character flaw rather than a physiological event. So I would like to invite you to shift that understanding and that narrative, and recognizing that while, yes, of course, your processing speed has slowed, or that your fuse has shortened, it is the first step in calibrating your compass, per se, so you can find your way home. Um, so keep in mind, healing doesn't mean going back to where you were because with a brain injury, they're all unique. They're like, your very own unique thumbprint. It does mean that you can build forward into someone that you're capable of becoming. So, what does this actually feel like, say, on a Tuesday morning? When we say cognitive changes, that sounds so sterile, and I'm not one for sterile verbiage. So, let's talk about what it feels like. It's memory and concentration, sure, but what that feels like is walking into a room, having the purpose of your movement just evaporate from your mind. You walk in the kitchen, oh my gosh, Katarina, why am I in here? I know I came in here for something, which is common, even for individuals without a TBI like myself, but it is more pronounced more often. And it feels like trying to hold water in your hands, or at least this is the experience that I've been told. Like no matter how tight you squeeze, the details, the appointments, the names, the tasks slip through your fingers. It's mood and irritability, that flash of irritation where kind of that rage feels like a physical temperature spike. You feel it, in your stomach, in your chest, your face, your ears, wherever you feel that stress in your body over something small or minute, like, say, a drop set of keys or a loud commercial. And immediately after that explosion comes the shame of, I'm sorry, like I don't know where that came from. And these shifts can be just as confusing for you as they are for the people around you. It's decision making and judgment. The mental fatigue of choosing what to eat for dinner feels as heavy as a tactical decision once did because your bandwidth is gone and you may feel a little bit frozen. And then connection. When your brain is working overtime to just process the lights and the sounds of a room, you have nothing left for the people in it. You're kind of, withdrawn because not because you don't love them, but just because you're emotionally bankrupt. And that bank account is empty, so it's hard to continue giving. We often think TBI is reserved for catastrophic related injuries, especially in terms of first responders and veterans. Kind of that stereotypical, oh, I got a TBI from deployment, when in reality, it's far more subtle and far more pervasive. So most of these injuries happen in the quiet moments. So that could look like training, accidents, falls, just from the accumulation of living life at a high velocity. And then also keep in mind too that when you do have a TBI, your chances of having another TBI after that increase just because, of course, gait and stability. So do keep that in mind and be leery of that. So no ladders. Um, Also keep in mind over 450,000 service members have walked this path over the last 2 decades. So you are a part of a massive silent cohort, excuse me. And sometimes this injury rarely travels alone. It may have various traveling companions dependent upon your life experience. So again, I'm not lumping this all into one, saying that if you do have a TBI, you're more guaranteed to have PTSD because of course it depends on the mechanism of your injury. So it walks together with post-traumatic stress, with depression. It can walk together with sleep disorders, and it's a tangled web. So if you're trying to treat depression, but you're ignoring the brain injury, you're pulling on the wrong thread. You won't be able to untie that knot if you don't know how it was tied. So really understanding the scope of this, that is vast and complex, is not meant to overwhelm you. I'm trying to validate your experience. So there are 4 lies that you may tell yourself. These are probably one of the few. So lie number 1, asking for help means that I'm weak. And I'd really, really like you to reframe that. Say, for instance, if you were navigating a ship through a storm and your rudder jammed, would you be strong to ignore it? Likely not. You don't want to run the ship aground or you don't want to sink. The courageous act would be to call for a tow. So keeping that self-awareness takes courage to say, I'm not okay. I need additional support. Line number two is it'll just go away. And this is one that everyone that I've met with a TBI has often said, or at least in my experience. Things will improve. It just takes time. Time heals everything. The tough it out strategy works for a blister. It doesn't quite work for neurobiology. So ignoring a brain injury doesn't make it disappear. It kind of allows it to set in concrete and it delays your return to that life that you're wanting. Like I mentioned earlier, a brain injury is like a fingerprint. No two are alike. So there is no standard timeline for returning to your previous functioning or capabilities. Line number three, only the severe ones matter. I was knocked out. I'm fine. I know, my buddy has way more severe injuries than I do. And you kind of have this disenfranchisement of the severity of your injury based on the mechanism, which is so bizarre because an injury is an injury. You can sustain a concussion, which is a significant disruption to your neural pathways without ever losing consciousness. The severity of the impact does not always correlate to the severity of the struggle that follows. So your experience is valid, regardless of the mechanism. Line number four is this will end my career. And like I had mentioned, I did disclose that my husband did sustain a TBI as a service member. And holy moly, he did not want to seek any help after that TBI. And I do have his consent to speak about this, but this was a huge one. Katerina, I'm not going to be deployable. I'm not going to get promoted. I won't be able to be in line for future leadership opportunities. But the truth is that untreated symptoms are the real threat to your career because your performance drops when you're navigating through that mental fog. And early intervention is, I want you to consider it as a career preserver. And getting help helps you stay kind of in the game, so to speak. So we talked about the knot, and let's look at the threads here. So it is incredibly common to stand in the middle of your life and ask, is this my brain or is this my mind? Is this an injury or is this trauma? And the answer is often yes. The data shows us that nearly 3/4 of those with TBI also navigate PTSD, and they feed each other. The headache from the TBI shortens your fuse, which then triggers the irritability of the PTSD, which then, of course, ruins your sleep, which makes the brain fog worse. And it's this cycle. So you might recognize the physical signs, the pressure in the head that might feel like a vice, or the fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. You might know the cognitive gaps or changes, like staring at a dinner menu and you're looking at the words and you're sitting there for 10 minutes and the server keeps coming over. Are you ready yet? No, I still don't know what I want. And it's not a matter of I'm just really indecisive. It's just a matter of your processing speed isn't what it used to be. And perhaps you're looking at the information and you're not really taking it in, or you're rereading the same paragraph of a book or an article 3 times because you're not absorbing the information. You might feel emotional or behavioral shifts, the isolation, the sudden tears, and maybe even numbness. And numbness doesn't mean, that you've lost all emotion. In fact, it's the complete opposite. It's you're so filled with emotion that you've triggered into this numb state. So this isn't a list of failures. I don't want you to, feel like I'm talking about all the things that can go wrong. It's just we're trying to map the terrain, and just like any map, once you see where their hazards are, you can learn to navigate around them. But you need a professional evaluation to help you distinguish the mountain from the cloud. So why do people hesitate? Why do they wait years? Often it comes down to the environment that they were forged in. Leadership matters and culture matters. And we know that in environments where leaders dismiss pain, where the answer to everything is drink water or toughen it up or drive on or mission first, the walls of silence tend to get a little bit taller. And that kind of leadership is just, it's toxic to the brain. It creates this biological stress response that actually inhibits healing because it's not creating a safe space for you to seek help or the support that you're needing. And it kind of teaches you, that your value is solely tied to silence. But when we flip that on its head, when we have leaders who normalize the maintenance of well-being, the stigma dissolves. We need to be the leaders for ourselves that maybe you never had, and you need to be able to authorize your own wellness. And also in the same capacity too, if you are in a leadership position, it's really important to have these open conversations to, again, kind of flip it on its head and then change the response or change the culture of help-seeking behavior and support. So I want to share a number with you. A recent survey of veterans and first responders, 44% say that they were terrified to seek help because their peers would judge them. They think if I admit this, they'll think that I'm broken or that I'm weak. But when we ask those same peers, excuse me, when they ask those same peers, the people standing to your left and your right, the people in this virtual room, would you judge someone for seeking help? Only 12% said yes. And you might be a glass half empty kind of person and say, well, that's that 12% that did say yes. And that could definitely be my leadership, which yes, it could, but it is only 12%. We're projecting this phantom judgment onto people who would not think twice about you getting the support that you need. So the barrier is not the individual next to you. The barrier is that internalized stigma, kind of like a ghost. And today we're going to walk right through that ghost. So if we walk through that fear, what is on the other side? Hope. And not just wishful thinking, toxic positivity, but hard scientific hope. Your brain is not a static object. It's malleable, it's dynamic. It can rewire, adapt, and overcome. And if you attend my other classes, I love talking about neuroplasticity. It is my favorite thing to talk about because, your brain is constantly looking for new pathways and it is an innovation machine. So early intervention changes the trajectory. If you simply treat sleep, symptoms can drop by 30%. If you engage in cognitive rehab, you can see physical changes in the brain structure on an MRI. So we're not really talking about, kind of learn to live with it. It's more so learning to overcome it. You're not broken. Your system needs an update and it needs support. So we've kind of talked about, Katarina, that sounds great in theory, but how do we run that update? You need a diagnostic. You kind of need to see what's under the hood. And we call it the neuropsychological evaluation. And I want you to think of it like this, for those of you who may not be familiar with a neuropsychological evaluation. Imagine you're in a dark room and it's filled with furniture and you keep bumping your shins, you're tripping over chairs, you keep hurting yourself. You think, oh gosh, I'm just so clumsy. I can't get this right. I'm not competent. Like I'm not as competent as I used to be. The evaluation is not a test that you pass or fail. It is simply turning on the lights. So then suddenly you can see the chair. You could see the table. You're not tripping anymore. You can walk around them. So this process is considered the gold standard. It is a series of puzzles and tasks, no needles or claustrophobic scanners. It's just you and a specialist mapping out how your brain processes information. It untangles that knot and it tells us, this is PTSD, this is TBI, and this is you just needing a nap. It gives you the map, and then once you have the map, you can navigate with a team of providers to navigate next steps of your treatment plan or support plan. So this is pretty simple. You only need to do 3 things to kind of get this into motion is just starting the conversation. It doesn't have to be a formal declaration. It could just be a conversation with your primary care provider. I'm still having trouble focusing. I'm not sleeping right. I heard about this thing called a neuropsychological evaluation. What are the next steps to receive that? Usually 9 times out of 10, well, 10 times out of 10, you'll have to receive a referral. So, of course, you want to validate the conversation if you do need help guiding that conversation. There are some different tools that you can use to navigate that. Um, my train kind of got off track there, but you can get screened, you can use the helps tool, and then you can be referred to the neuropsychologist or a VA polytrauma site. So building support, you're not going to be able to navigate this alone. Well, you can, but it's more beneficial to have that team and to have that safe space, and especially peer support. So, people who speak your language, who understand your experience. If you are a veteran or a first responder, it's usually best to be in a support group with veterans or first responders, just because you can share that lived experience. People who know what it's like, and connection is essential for healing. Family. So if your family is a safe space, let them in. They're likely already trying to help or trying to support. Maybe they're walking on eggshells, or they don't know where to begin. So just, you can give them the map if you do receive a neuropsychological evaluation, and they can help you navigate next steps as well. And then do seek out professionals, like I mentioned, neuropsychologists, therapists, primary care providers. There's just so many professionals out there who can support you and your unique needs. And then lastly, community resources. You know, for instance, Brain Northwest. Brain Northwest offers so much support, whether it's classes or, navigating resources within the locality. So do explore these. In the next few slides. You'll see that I've listed quite a few resources that you can access, but do continue to use these local community resources. And here's the local Washington, National Crisis Support. And just keep in mind, we've covered a lot of ground. We've looked at the invisible nature of injury. We've named the silence. We've challenged the myths, but knowledge alone does not change anything. Your action is what changes your situation. So, the journey will start with a decision, and the decision to stop carrying the weight alone. A decision to view your symptoms not as a character flaw, but as a signal that it is time to maybe recalibrate. It's time to let some other people in, because maybe what you're doing right now isn't suiting you. So just really think about resilience not being so much as bouncing back to who you were before. Time moves in one way, but building forward and integrating this experience into a new, stronger version of yourself. You've served others, you've protected others, and now I am just asking you today to take the courage to protect the most valuable asset you have, which is your own mind. So turn on those lights, get the map, and keep moving forward. Thank you.
Hey there, sorry about that. I'm gonna stop recording.